Hi there, it's August the 7th and we continue our journey through the book of Ezra, and we're reading now in chapters 5 and 6. We found that at the end of chapter 4 the building of the temple had come to an abrupt halt because of the lobbying of the Samaritans against the Jews from rebuilding the temple. The Samaritans were appealing to the history of the Jews, which was of a troublesome nation going back a long way and possible threat to the Assyrian Empire. But now the Jews are encouraged by two prophets, and prophets that are familiar to us from the pages of the scriptures, because they form numbers 10 and 11 in the list of minor prophets that we find at the end of our Old Testament. And this is Haggai and Zechariah, and these are actually rising up and they're saying, come on Jews, come on guys, continue the work you've started. This is not time to sit back, this is not time to get discouraged, this is time to go for it. Now, speaking historically, the king who had spoken to suppress the work going on is now out of the way, and a new king has come to the throne. This is King Darius Hystaspes, who comes to the throne around 521 BC, and he is favourable towards the Jewish people, as we'll find. However, it seems that when the Jews respond to Haggai and Zechariah's encouragement to start the rebuilding of the temple again, as they start the work, perhaps the Samaritans, who have previously appealed against it a couple of years before, now come and they complain to the local government, because the Jews receive a visit. It's an inquiry visit from a couple of officials called Tatnai and Shethar-boznai. Possibly Shethar-boznai is Tatnai's secretary, but they come and they're asking what authority they have for building this building. What authority do they have for doing this work? And this time the Jews respond by saying, well, actually we have the authorization from the decree of King Cyrus the Great, who after the fall of Babylon, he came to the throne and sent us back to be able to do this. So not only that, but supplied us with the means of doing it. And it's on this authority that we are continuing the work. And so Tatnai and Shethar-boznai go back to the king. They go back to now Darius, and Darius has a search made in his records, in his archives, and sure enough comes across the decree of Cyrus the Great, which allows the Jews to go back, not only to go back, but to build a temple, to rebuild the temple in the name of their God. And so Darius Hystaspes confirms this decree. Not only that, but he says to Tatnai and Shethar-boznai, give the people of Judah help in doing this. Give them support, give them what they need in order to build this temple. Or not only that, but please have them pray for us and please have them sacrifice on our behalf, because they obviously, Darius wants to be seen as a benevolent ruler and one who is encouraging the people of the different nations. And so with joy the Jews are able to commence the rebuilding of the temple, and they manage to complete it. Not only that, but they are under the protection of the king. They're under protection of Darius, who says that anyone who tries to stop them, anyone who pulls this down, will do so on pain of death. So there really is a strong commitment to see the Jews rebuild. And Haggai and Zechariah continue to encourage the Jews in the building so that the temple is eventually completed. And in chapter 6, when we come to the description of the building of the temple, it says that when it's completed they have the dedication of the temple. And actually that word is the word Hanukkah, which means dedication, which obviously later became the feast connected with the time of the Maccabees. But the Hanukkah of the temple, the dedication of the temple, is celebrated by the Jews. It's interesting that these chapters 5 and 6 are largely written still in Aramaic, because they're connected. Remember, Aramaic is the language of the empire, it's the language of the Assyrians, it's the language of the authorities, and so because it's dealing with decrees and authorities and inquiries, that's written in Aramaic. But it's interesting that at verse 19 of chapter 6, it begins to talk about the celebration of Passover, and the language reverts to traditional Hebrew language, because this is talking about the Jews' celebration of Pesach, of Passover. And they have a wonderful celebration of Pesach, of Passover, in the new temple. It's a tremendous mark, a milestone of the faithfulness of God to his people, that they're able to reinstate the feasts of the Lord in the new temple that's actually been built. And this was something that is a testimony to God's own heart for his people, that even though they've been in exile, and even though it's taken them a while to actually get round to doing it, under the encouragement, with the encouragement of the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, they've actually seen eventually this Hanukkah, this dedication of the temple, and no one can stop them, and no one can come against them, because they're under the protection of the king. God can do amazing things when we appeal to him. When we try and do things under our own strength, we find things go astray. But he has put things in place. He particularly has put in place the provision of Jesus, the provision of salvation, the provision through his resurrection of new life, and the restoration of all things through him. And we can be sure that he is with us, he is for us, and we need not be discouraged in the continual bringing in of his kingdom. And so, like the Jews here with the rebuilding of the temple, we are seeing his kingdom continually re-established in our day. Have a very good August the 7th.